All right, welcome everybody to Cognitive Distortion Day, hence the Persona 5 background that we got here. Persona 5, for those of you that haven't played it, is a RPG that is partly the simulation of life of like a Japanese high school student as, you work at like a flower store and a convenience and things like that. And on your spare time, you and your friends, the Phantom Thieves, um, enter into these mind palaces created by people whose cognitive distortions are a cognitive distortion is like when your view of reality doesn't comport with reality, when it doesn't match reality. And they have these so distorted views of reality that are so detached from reality, it creates an entire dungeon filled with monsters. And you and your friends go into these dungeons and fight the monsters and somehow fix the person's brain by killing them inside of their mind palace, which I'm not sure how that mechanic is supposed to work exactly. But for example, in the first dungeon, there's this abusive volleyball coach who believes that he is the king of the high school because he leads his high school to like tournament victories or something like that. So he's the boss; he can do anything he wants. And by killing him inside of his mind palace, then he realizes that he's been treating people poorly and turns himself in to the police and things like that. So that is kind of what Persona 5 is about. It's about cognitive distortions, which is our topic for today. So let's get going. You want to play it out of curiosity? Anyone here a Persona 5? Not really killing them, but stealing what caused their distortion. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. You're stealing their hearts, I think, right? Something like that. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. It's a pretty big game, and Royal Edition came out not too long ago, like a year or so ago. So a lot of people hype that game. I'm a reasonable fan of it. Some of the levels they take a long time. Some of the dungeons are too big and really should not be that long. So I would give it a B overall, and I know that's probably gonna offend some people out there. So cognitive distortions are when you believe reality is a certain way and it ain't that way. And so one of the approaches therapists can take, and it's not the only approach, but it's one of the approaches that therapists can take, is walking somebody through what they know to be true versus what they think they know to be true, right? So you think, oh, this person hates me. And it's possible the person does hate you, but it's also, there's a possibility they don't hate you. And so you have to like look at the evidence. It's critical thinking, right? And figure out what areas their beliefs do comport with reality, where their beliefs are in line with reality, and where they're just completely delusional, off base, not attached to reality at all. And then a lot of times people can just fix themselves, right? Like, you're like, I thought all these people hated me, and they don't. I'm just hurting myself. Okay, good to know. So it's a long game. Oh, my heart. Yeah. Did I steal your heart? The Phantom Thieves. Okay. So mind reading is the first one. We're going to talk about a few of them today. Mind reading is the first one. Very common. Very common. It's when you believe you know what the other person is thinking, and you don't. Like, in fact, nobody ever really knows what other people are thinking. We have no telepathy, as far as I'm aware. Like, nobody can read each other's minds. We're not like Xavier, Professor X from the X-Men. Um, and this causes problems when we think we know. Like, have you guys ever had that situation where you're like texting somebody or you're messaging them on Discord or Slack or something? You're like talking back and forth, and all of a sudden they stop responding, and you have that like, did I say something wrong? Like, did I, you like scroll up through your chat, like, did I like tell them to go f themselves? Like, did I say something wrong? And this happened to me. Like, I drove to the park to teach meditation, I was talking to a friend of mine. I go to the park to teach meditation, and I got a text like, "Did I say something wrong? Did I? I'm like, no, I was just in the car for like 10 minutes. Like I was just texting, and then I like got in the car and drove to the park, and then I was like, did I say? Like no, I was just in the car. Like we're texting, we're not in a phone call. The whole point of texting is that like it's asynchronous. So, um, that's funny. Yeah. Yeah, when the thing drops down, they read, they read your message and they don't respond. You're just like, so. Uh, I barely know what I'm thinking about. No, they're probably just doing something. That's what I'm thinking. Good, good, good. Yeah, that's healthier. But the yeah, that's a great meme. I love that. So, other examples would be, you show up late for work and you think, oh, everybody knows that I was late. A student in the 9 a.m. section, or sorry, the 8 a.m. section, gave an example of like, when you like go to the restroom and it sprays water everywhere. Like sometimes like the aerators on the sinks don't work very well. And it sprays water. You get water in your pants, and then everybody's gonna think I peed myself. So there's little droplets of water all over the outside of your jeans, and so and you assume they hate you, yeah, or you assume people are talking about you, things like that. And this is mind reading, right? It's possible they do hate you, but like unless you actually know, like it's not very healthy to just assume that everybody hates you, because like that's really depressing. You know what I mean? Like to just think that everyone hates me. Like it's super depressing. So unless you actually have strong evidence that they actually hate you, like it's and maybe they do. Maybe there's something you're maybe you're a jerk. Like I don't know. Like it's a possibility. I'm not saying it's not, but like when you're just assuming the worst, you know, especially when you're doing mind reading, it's going to depress you, maybe for no reason whatsoever. Because, heads up, a lot of people just don't care. You know, like if you walk in with like water on your pants, like they might glance at it and be like, okay, whatever. And they just go back to life. But you just sit there like, oh, they thought I peed, like, and a lot of people just don't care. Like they're the center of their own universe, right? That's something my mom told me back in the day. And it was great advice. She's like, everybody's the hero of their own story. They're the center of their own universe. You think that they're all talking about you because you know, you're looking out from your eyes, but they are from theirs too. And a lot of the times they're just not thinking about you, like they got their own stuff going on. They got, you know, relationship issues, and they got homework, and you're probably just peripherally related to them. And it was kind of freeing. It's like, okay, cool. I don't need to like super, police what I say, to a certain extent. Like you don't want to just go up and be like, screw you, but like to a certain extent, like, yeah, other people are just talking about themselves and their friends, and, they're not, like gossiping like, oh, Kearney wore his polo t-shirt again. You're like, nobody cares. So, oh no, anyway, exactly. Assume the worst, you're not surprised. Yeah, and that's what this bullet point here is really saying. It's like a lot of people think that, if you're pessimistic, if you think the worst, then you're shielding yourself. But actually, you're sort of just like inflicting pain on yourself, unnecessarily. Like you're just making yourself anxious for no reason. You're crushing your own ego for no reason. Whatever. So, um, black and white thinking is the next one. I always say this: you're not as important as you think you are. Like we assume we matter, never fully. For it, something you did. Yeah, like you are important, right? Like there's not there's it goes back to like the virtue ethics thing, right? Like some people think they're completely insignificant, and some people think they're the most awesome thing since French toast was made. And the reality is probably somewhere in the middle. Like how much you matter to other people, you matter a lot to your friends, and you matter less to your acquaintances. You matter less to people that you just kind of like, maybe your coworkers or something you work with. Like there's a spectrum of like how much you matter to your family, probably a lot, and if you have a significant other, then probably a lot to them too. But and that's probably how they proportion. That's probably how they proportion their who they think about, right? It's like, your girlfriend probably thinks about you more than some rando on the street. You take up a greater share of their life, and so they think about you more. And so it's not like they're not thinking about you, but like, what my mom was saying is like, look, you're looking out of your eyes and they're looking out of their eyes, and so you're used to having a perspective on the universe here, and everyone's that way. So, don't get too caught up in worrying about, the perspectives of other people, because they have their own stuff going on. So, TikTok's making people think they're the main character. Yeah, it definitely feeds narcissism. Yeah, TikTok, like last semester when I taught in person at Fresno State, like I'm reasonably certain somebody did the TikTok challenge where they smashed tiles in the classroom, and like we walked in, like the tiles are all bricked up and broken, and there's sand that's actually broken tiles, and like it was messed up, dude. So I don't like French toast. That's funny. You live in Spain without the S. That's funny. Okay. So next up is black and white thinking. And if you want to understand the internet and discourse on the internet, black and white thinking is the the go-to. Mind reading is used a lot in real life because we have these models of like other people in our head, and they're always imperfect because they're just like a little bit of your brain is used to simulate other people. Like if I say this, they'll say this, and their brain's much bigger than the little model, and we confuse our little model for reality, and it might be accurate, it might not be. Black and white thinking, though, is for the internet, and the internet is all or nothing. We've talked about this before. All or nothing fallacies, black and white fallacies. The underlying principle underneath it is black and white thinking. And partly, I believe, if I'm not perfect, I'm a failure. Exactly. That's not a healthy way of going through life. And it's in part just my uneducated opinion, in part due to this notion that people are either heroes or villains, is in part, in my uneducated opinion, is due to children's stories, right? You can characterize most people in a children's story as either a good guy or a bad guy. They're either a hero or they're a villain. And then people never develop nuance and shades of gray and complexity and things like that as they mentally develop. And so when they get to the internet, they're like, "Oh, you said anything supporting Trump, you must be a Trump supporter and love Trump and do everything. You're probably the January 6th rights." Whereas, "Oh, you said something supporting Biden. Oh, you must love Biden and everything he did, and you must sniff children and like, like." And it's like, no, like it's possible to agree with people on some points and disagree with them on other points. There's no person I agree with 100%. And, there's probably nobody I disagree with 100% either. Charles Manson probably, believes 2 + 2 = 4. I don't know. I probably would agree with him on that point, And people are like, "What? You're defending Charles Manson, the famous murderer?" And like, no, I'm not. And that's the trouble with internet discourse, is because if you say anything at all, in defense of somebody that they hate, you must be part of that group, and we hate you now too. And that is an incredibly unhealthy way of going through life. And I deal with this all the time on the internet, and I just don't like it. It's just one of my least favorite things with talking with random people on the internet, is that they'll just immediately pigeonhole you into a box based on the first thing you say. So, Richard Stallman, who's the guy who said Persona 5. Bernie said Persona 5 is only a B, so he hates the game. As my second favorite game, I hate him. Yeah, that's exactly black and white thing. I don't hate Persona 5. It's just, okay. All right, Jaden, the burger level, the UFO burger level. Tell me that dungeon was not too long. Okay, that's all I'm saying. All right, that's all I'm saying. So if you don't pass the class, then I'm not smart. Yeah, black and white. is black and white thinking related to lower IQ? I don't think so, because I've known, like, Richard Stallman is like a certifiable genius, right? And he black and white thinks all the time. It is a clear division between right and wrong. And so, for example, if anything goes wrong, then everything is ruined, right? And so he came over to give a speech in our town, and he doesn't like staying in hotels because they take his information down. He's a big privacy advocate. And he fished around in his pocket, and he couldn't find a chocolate bar that he was like, oh, I can't find the chocolate. Like I'm staying at your house, and so I got you a chocolate bar, and I can't find the chocolate bar now. So everything's ruined. Everything's ruined. And he's like starts going through his bag frantically, like everything's ruined, because I can't find this chocolate bar. I thought we would enjoy this chocolate bar together, and I can't find the chocolate bar. And then he finds it, and it's just like a regular chocolate bar. Like, it's not like anything special. It's just like you go to Save Mart, you buy a chocolate bar for $1. That was what he got for me as a thank you present for letting me for letting him stay at my house. And and then he calmed down, because everything's fine now, and yeah, I would agree that it's probably a maturity thing, Christian. But partly I just blame, like, literature, like, honestly, because we're trying to teach kids morality, and in morality there's right and wrong, and so you have the noble huntsman, and you have the wicked witch, and you have these archetypes that we're trying to, like, teach kids about. And at some point you have to develop, like, usually when you're like a teenager, you should be developing subtlety and nuance, right? Like, you start realizing, like, when you're studying history. I'm pointing at my history books over there. I have two whole bookshelves that I'm reading right now, or have read. That, like, there's very few people in history that come off completely cleanly. You know what I mean? Like, people say, well, look at how great Mother Teresa was, and then, you read, like, Christopher Hitchens' book, The Missionary Position, which is highly critical of Mother Teresa. But then you can read books highly critical of the missionary position, because he does black and white thinking, and he made this assumption that, well, she's running a hospital, and she didn't run a hospital, and so, like, there's, like, you have to, like, read both sides and, like, try and figure out where the truth is. Like, does Hitchens have a point? Hitchens was actually used as the devil's advocate for the canonization process, the process of Mother Teresa becoming a saint. He was actually brought in as a witness against Mother Teresa, and that's why he did the research on it and wrote this book. And then that book has been criticized by other people, and you have to dig into it, and it's a hard thing, because, like, she was given all this money, but, like, the criticism was she could have used it to, like, heal people, but she wasn't running a hospital. She was running a hospice. She was running and there's a pretty big difference between a hospital and a hospice that a lot of people just didn't understand. And so, and she was given money by, like, a criminal, and then the victims of the criminal wanted the money back that he stole from them, and she didn't give it back. And so, like, like, she's like, the poor here need it more. Like, I don't know, like, that's it's tough, and people a lot of times don't like having, like, like, you got people, like, they were pulling people out of the gutters of Calcutta, that are literally covered in sewage, and they pulled them out and, like, cleaned them up and fed them and pulled worms out of their skin. Like, they weren't running a hospital, though. Like, they were just trying to make people comfortable. And it's like, did that person need the money more than the victims of the Keating Five in America, financial fraud? Like, I can't answer that question. That's a tough one. And so, way worse than P5. Yeah. I heard Royal Edition fixed the hamburger thing. And so, just as, like, that's one of the reasons why I think history is so important, is because you learn, like, a lot of these heroes. Like, look at Gandhi sometime if you want to be disturbed. So, it's like, you learn that, like, people are humans. What a weird concept. So, but, like, on the internet, like, you say anything and they'll immediately 100% or 0%. Those are the only two options, and it just irritates me. The reality has subtlety and nuance, and people do good actions some of the time, they do bad actions some of the time. There's nobody I agree with 100%. There's nobody I disagree with 100%. Um, and that's just too much for the internet to deal with, as far as I can tell. So yeah, it's a maturity thing, education thing, lack of training in the humanities and philosophy. I don't know. I don't know. What determines IQ? Whether you pour cereal or milk first. What, you don't put apple juice over your cereal? That's the that's the only right way of doing it. Yeah, so IQ tests, it's actually a tough thing to assess because, like, IQ is supposed to assess, like, your innate intelligence. And it's a quotient, it's a ratio of, like, what problems you can solve versus your physical age. It's like your mental age divided by your physical age, technically. But it's sort of like a proxy for, like, how your general intelligence is. And it's controversial because, like, are you assessing their intelligence or are you assessing their ability to read the question? You know, so um, humans suck, but suck in different amounts. Yeah, yeah, and I'm not saying that there aren't villains or heroes. Like, there are, but, like, if you think that heroes have never done anything wrong in their life, you think that villains have never done anything good, it's dubious. So pour the ketchup, yeah, add ketchup to the cereal. Exactly. Okay. Yeah, during the Gulf War, George W. Bush said, "If you're not with us, you're against us. If you're not on Team America, you're on Team Evil." And so there's an axis of evil in the world, and such speeches may be appropriate for wartime, where you demonize your enemies, right? You dehumanize the enemy to get your people fired up to kill them. Is that a good thing? I can't answer that question, but it's, again, black and white thinking. We're team good, they're team evil. Let's go kill them. So catastrophic thinking, what Stallman was doing was related to catastrophic thinking too. Everything's ruined. Everything's ruined. And I'm like, bro, it's okay. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. And he's like, you can't tell me it'll be okay. You don't know it's gonna be okay. It's just a choco bar, dude. Like, it's not. Like, I don't need the calories. Like, I got enough. I got enough calories in reserve here around my waist. Like, I don't need a chocolate bar. It'll be fine. But don't tell me that. And it's immediately catastrophic. Everything's ruined. Everything's going to be horrible because one bad thing happened. It's like students who, like, forget to take the quiz. Like, your quiz is a very small part of your grade, and each individual quiz is a very small part of a small part of your grade, right? And students will still message me like, "Oh, I forgot to take the quiz." It's like, just take the loss. Like, just take the L. It's not that important. But, like, a lot of students have been trained. Again, you can blame our K-12 education system. They've been trained to be perfectionists, right? I would say Clovis Unified is especially bad at that. Where, like, Clovis Unified students oftentimes have a real hard trouble accepting a loss, because they're trained to be, like, perfectionistic, and it's not particularly healthy, you know. And A students who get A's are oftentimes the most prone to fail in my classes. Not this class, because this class, A students, like, if you show up on time, you do the quizzes, you do the homework, you're gonna pass the class. It's like you have to just not do work in order to fail this class, right? Like, even if you get a 0 on both midterms and the final, if you do all the homework, you get a B. Like, it's pretty hard to fail. But a lot of people just stop coming to class. And so if you're an A student and you got good study habits and time management, you'll pass this class. But I'm talking about, like, the higher level classes. A students oftentimes have the worst time and drop out, actually worse than, like, B level students, because B level students are used to having to work at it. Like, I don't really understand this. I'm going to sit down and study and work at it and turn it over in my head and start early so I have enough time to get there, because I'm not as smart as these genius students. And then they figure it out. Whereas the A students, a lot of times, I don't understand something. This has never happened before. It's a disaster. Everything's ruined. And drop. Like one of my friends dropped one of my own classes because he, like, didn't get something immediately. And guess what? In computer science, everybody gets stuck at some point. Like, this is something I was talking about with the professors in Toronto. It's like, time management's a big deal, sure, but like everybody gets stuck at some point. And so just normalizing help was one of the recommendations, is normalizing that it's okay to ask for help. You can ask on Discord, you can ask at the tutorial center, you can ask me at office hours, or you can just message me, right? And A students have the worst time with it because they're not used to it. And it's catastrophic thinking. If I don't get this, I must be a moron. I don't understand Turing machines immediately. I must be the dumbest person on the planet. I'm going to fail out of college. I have to quit now. And that's not healthy, right? And so catastrophic thinking is when you immediately leap to the worst possible outcome from an event, right? Like, you show up late to work. Oh, they're going to fire me. You get a B on a quiz. Oh, I'm never going to graduate from college. And like on an airplane, right? Like, a lot of people are afraid. Like, you see them sitting there like on an airplane, like the plane's taking off and they're all terrified. And they were more likely to die on the drive to the airport than they were when the plane's taking off. But these sort of intrusive thoughts come in. And that's one of the reasons why I teach meditation, is because you can deal with intrusive thoughts. It's nice. And you can be peaceful and free of anxiety and stress. It's pretty cool. But like, they're worried about the wrong thing. Like, what if the plane crashes? It's like, you're far more likely to get hit on Peach, than you are for the plane crashing here. Like, we do a pretty good job with plane maintenance and stuff like that. And the pilot, like, when I was coming back from Toronto, they're like, we're gonna have to de-ice the plane, because it was snowing. Like, when I was there, it was great, -5 degrees. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it. It was snowing, and so they're like, we're gonna have to go through de-icing, and if you smell antifreeze, there's not anything wrong with the plane. It's just the de-icing agents coming in, and don't worry, the chemicals are all organic and actually safe. And I was like, yeah, good job, pilot. Like, the professor who I became kind of friends or acquaintances. I don't know, friends, sure, why not? He moved seats to sit next to me. He's like, that was one of the best in-flight announcements, well, we weren't flying it, from a pilot I've ever heard, because he understands that people are going to be smelling something, you're going to be smelling chemicals, and so he's telling them, this is just the antifreeze, it's organic, it's not harmful, because people immediately like, there's a chemical leak in the plane, and he understands the catastrophic thinking, and he worked to mitigate it. So props to Delta, So I teach meditation like an elective. No, I teach it. Normally I would have taught a class by now, but it's been raining constantly. So we've had 12 storms now in Fresno. Like, you can go to the park and sink into the mud. So no, just as extra credit kinds of things. So I'll let you guys know once it gets sunny. Once it gets sunny, I'll let you guys know about that. So yeah, catastrophic things. So please post on chat an example from real life. It could be you, it could be a friend, but something you've seen in real life of either mind reading or black and white thinking or catastrophic thinking. I'll pause the recording now. All right, so good answers. If I didn't finish a homework assignment, I'm going to fail the class. It's catastrophic thinking. You get an 89%. My life is ruined. Yeah, and again, like, Clovis School District in particular teaches perfectionism. I'm not, like, there's a good and bad side to like trying to always do your best, but you should always do your best. But if you don't get a perfect score, like, you should still be okay with it. You know what I mean? Like, there's virtue ethics, right? Like, perfectionism and slackerism, and somewhere in the middle, like, you do your best, but like are okay if you're not completely perfect. Where I think virtue lies with that. So, yeah, your sweater got a scuff mark, now it's ruined, things like that. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So next up, we have parasocial relationships. Parasocial relationships is when you feel that you have a friend in somebody and they don't know you exist. Or maybe they're vaguely aware that you exist, but you're not friends. It's a one-way relationship. So BTS, yeah, great example. For me, in my life, the example would be a YouTube streamer in Japan called Chris Broad. He runs a YouTube channel called Abroad in Japan. And every time he comes out with a new video, my family will gather around the old television, we'll eat some food and watch Chris Broad. He is a funny British guy who just has a very sarcastic way of describing, life in Japan. And he finds some of the most horrific parts of Japan, like these old like museums that have like all these like crazy weird looking sculptures in it. And his last one, he went to like a abandoned village and there's like dolls there and stuff like that, and you're just like, wow, what, you know but like my wife and I watch him, we're like, look at that, he's got a thing for Char, doesn't he? Like, oh yeah, I think you think they're dating? And I don't know, yeah, maybe they are. He should just ask around, and we're talking about this guy like he's our friend, and he's not. Like, he has no idea who I am, and that's fine. Like, I'm not one of these creepy stalker people. It's just like I enjoy watching him, but it still feels like he is a friend, and he has a social group like Natsuki and these, some of them are Japanese, some of them are white, and it's like we know their social group, and so in our brains they kind of take up a spot for a friend, and that can be okay. It can also be unhealthy. And so parasocial relationships is not necessarily a bad thing. Like with all these cognitive distortions, right? The problem is like when your belief system doesn't comport to reality, when it doesn't match reality, it can cause problems. And so as long as your metacognition is working okay, and you're like, look, Chris isn't my friend. If I saw him on the street in Japan, I'd just be like, hey, Chris, just go on with my life. I'm not going to come up and just hug him out of the blue. You're my best friend, or something like that. As long as your thoughts are like in line with reality, it's okay. Like sports people talk about people on sports teams, like they know them. Historians talk about their history subjects, the people they're studying, as if they know them. You can even pay money, and this is starting to, there's downsides. You can actually pay money to a celebrity to pretend to be your friend. So like Billy Boyd, who played one of the hobbits in Lord of the Rings, a friend of mine met him at the One Ring conference after the Return of the King won like 11 Oscars, I think it was 20 years ago. And so she talked to him briefly and had a great interaction. Like, he's apparently a very nice guy. Like, this is not actually critical of Billy Boyd at all. And if somebody paid me $300 to record a 30-second message, I would take that too. And so, like, a year or two ago, her boyfriend paid, money on Cameo.com for Billy Boyd to leave her voice message on her birthday. It was really nice, like, hey, Elaine, do you remember me? Billy Boyd, we met 20 years ago. I was Pippin on Lord of the Rings. I just want to say, have a happy birthday, and I wish you all the best. He's a very nice guy, and I would most certainly take $300 to do that as well. But it can lead into like the next slide, where like you're paying celebrities to pretend that it's a two-sided relationship instead of a one-sided relationship. And so that's when you get into the dark side of parasocial relationships, like OnlyFans, Twitch, Patreon, things like that. And they'll pretend to be your friend, in exchange for cash money. Like a lot of the famous streamers, like people throw money at them because if you throw them $100, they're gonna be like, hey, Bill Kearney, thanks for the subs, you're the man. I'm like, oh, he knows me. Oh my gosh. And they don't. It's a one-sided relationship. They have no idea who I am, right? And that's why I've never, done that. Just to be clear, I find Twitch to be kind of horrible. I'd rather play video games than watch them. Call me crazy. I don't know. So don't ignore my $100 donation. Yeah. Put that up for the. There you go. Don't ignore my $100 donation. Yeah. So it can turn dark though. Like if you look at celebrities, like a lot of celebrities get stalkers, and they get stalkers because of parasocial relationships. They feel like this person really understands me, or a musician, the lyrics of the song, I've always wanted to set fire to the rain also. And Adele like really gets me because like she's the only person that's she's the only person who's rolled in the deep. I don't know. So And so like they develop these stalkers, and it's really scary. It's like people break into their houses and sleep on their couches and stuff like that. And caught Bill Kearney in 4K. um, I don't get it. So it can be hard on the celebrities. It can be hard on the streamers. Streamers feel like they have a lot of pressure to produce content, because if not, the relationship they have with their fans, not friends, their fans is going to deteriorate if they don't produce content on a regular basis. It's very stressful. They have to maintain this face, this persona. Maybe Chris Broad in real life is actually a really nice guy. I'm kidding. I'm sure he is. But he has this kind of demeanor of being a very sarcastic, sort of individual. He's quite funny. And a friend of mine is a moderator for a female Twitch streamer, and so people are constantly like, she never shows her face, but even still, people are like constantly trying to like figure out where she lives based on clues. Like, if she says, "Oh, it's cold today," they're like, "Oh, let's check the weather map in America and find out where it's cold." And okay, so she has to be in this area, and they like try and triangulate her location, and so like he and the other moderators are told like delete anything like that where people are trying to work together to locate her position. And it's scary, because people are trying to figure out where she is. What's wrong with that? Because again, stalking, like, it's a real thing. Like Jodie Foster was a child actress in a movie called Taxi Driver, and a guy called John Hinckley was obsessed with her from that movie, and he wanted to get her attention, and so he shot Ronald Reagan, the president of the United States. Reagan recovered. He also shot a guy named Brady, who the Brady Bill is named after, gun control, because of John Hinckley. And Hinckley just recently got out of prison after being in prison for 40 years or something, and has a YouTube channel now. So it's like, you can't make this stuff up. He's a YouTube musician now, with people watching the former assassin of a president. I don't know. Like, I can't explain it. So, yeah, definitely, there's definitely some dark downsides to this. Okay. Next up is Dunning-Kruger. Dunning-Kruger is the notion that as you start learning a subject, people's confidence rises much more rapidly than the percentage that they actually know. And if you give people a test, you ask them how did you do on the test. People that are in the lowest quadrants of the test overestimate their test results quite a bit, and people on the upper end underestimate it. So people that are quite competent tend to be humble, and people that are bad tend to be arrogant. This also explains a lot of the internet. I got my doctorate from Google University. I Googled the Ukraine situation. I spent 5 minutes looking up the history of Ukraine and Russia. I am now an expert on, Ukrainian and Russian, relations over the past 5 centuries. Ask me anything, and like, I mean, I'm sure you all saw this a year ago when the Ukraine conflict kicked off. All of a sudden, all of your friends became, like, experts on international relations between, Russia and Ukraine. It's just like, you're a pharmacist, like, you don't know anything, better than Twilight. So, one of the interesting things about being at SIGSI with other professors is actually how humble everybody is. Like, you'd think, like, they would like toss their egos around, like, I'm a professor at Berkeley, and they don't really. Like, the professor at Berkeley I talked to is like, I have a lot of imposter syndrome. Like, I don't feel I'm that great. And the reason for that is because once you've kind of become familiar with the terrain of a field, you realize how big it is. Like when you're learning to play music, like, oh, it's pretty easy. You just follow the music, you just follow the notes and just play the things. You're like, yeah, it's not too bad. And then, somebody mentions like the subdominant, and you start reading, like in music, the subdominant is the fourth tonal degree, and it's a 4 of the hat over it of the diatonic scale. It's so called because it's the same distance below the tonic as the dominant is above the tonic. In other words, the tonic is the dominant of the subdominant. So, the movable do selvage is the dominant of the sung is fa. And a cadential subdominant chord followed by a tonic chord produces so-called pelagial cadence. You're like, holy smokes, there's a lot to this, music thing. And when you start realizing just how big a field is, your confidence plummets because at first you're like, oh, you just do music. There's a note. You just play the note on the tin whistle, and the sound comes out. And it takes a little time to play it right without squeaking. But yeah, it's not too bad. It's pretty easy. I've had people tell me, computer science, anyone can do that. You don't know what you're talking about. Dunning-Kruger effect. By the way, Kroger is misspelled here deliberately. Kroger is a grocery store in the Midwest. This is called the Dunning-Kruger effect with a U. So, yeah, when people learn a little bit about evolution, they think they're an expert on evolution. They learn a little bit about theology. They think they're an expert on theology. And after you actually start studying something, your confidence in it plummets. And like I said, at SIGC, the professors were all very humble, like that I talked to at least, because we all know your expertise is probably in an area that I don't know anything about, right? Because my expertise might be on facial recognition. Your expertise might be on autonomous vehicles. Your expertise might be on C group theory, which I don't even know what that is. True story, by the way. I have a fellow coworker whose area of specialty, I don't know what it is. And at this point, I'm too afraid to ask. So, I'm like, cool, yeah, let's see. So, professors actually tend to be pretty humble around other professors because they probably know something I don't know. And so when we talk, we're typically just like, hey, tell me about your thing and I'll tell you about my thing. And we exchange knowledge and it's a great experience, actually. So, Dunning-Kruger is basically internet conversations. That and black and white thinking, explains 99% of all internet conversations where people think they're experts on something when they don't know anything, right? So I can move the blocks on Scratch. I'm an expert on computer science, exactly. And then finally, last thing, no, but you're not dumb, right? Like you're not dumb. That's the thing, right? Like I don't know, maybe you are dumb. I don't know you. To be fair, so. But like people with like an IQ of 75 estimate their IQ to be 115. And people with an IQ of like 90 estimate their IQ to be like 116. And people with an IQ of 150 estimate their IQ to be 125. And so people on the low end overestimate, people on the high end underestimate. That's you can, like I said, you can come at this a lot of different ways. So last one, motivated reasoning. So motivated reasoning is when we seek out evidence to confirm our beliefs. And this ties in very closely with a cognitive bias called confirmation bias. So with confirmation bias, if you're a Republican, you are inclined to believe good things about Trump and bad things about Biden. If somebody presents you evidence saying, look, Biden did something bad. If you're a Republican, you are inclined to believe it. If you are a Democrat, you are inclined to not agree with it and believe bad things about Trump and good things about Biden. And that's confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is we accept evidence that agrees with us and we reject evidence that disagrees with us, which is not good. And motivated reasoning is when you seek out things that agree with you, right? It's like if you're a Christian, you'll seek out evidence for God. Let's find the best arguments for God and present those. If you're an atheist, you seek out the best arguments against God, right? The trouble with this is this. This is actually the most terrifying thing there. This ties in with in-group bias as well, which is that and confirmation bias as well, is during the Christine Blasey Ford / Brett Kavanaugh hearings, you had basically two people presenting opposite views of the past 20, 30 years ago. Christine Blasey Ford said that Kavanaugh assaulted her. He flatly denied it. Everybody had access to the exact same evidence. Everybody had access to the same testimony, the same facts. There was nothing really concrete. It was just one person saying one thing and one person saying another thing. And this should terrify you. This graph here should terrify you because given the same evidence, people should in general come to the same conclusion. I'll say that again. Normally, if we're rational people, if I present you evidence, here's evidence for this, here's evidence against it. If we were neutral, impartial, rational people that weighed the evidence for and against something, you would expect to see widespread agreement on which one is right. Instead, what we saw with the same evidence presented we see Democrats supporting Christine Blasey Ford at a 7-to-1 ratio. And we see Republicans supporting Kavanaugh at the exact opposite. If you have a Democrat stamped on your heart, you believe the Democrat. If you have a Republican stamped on your heart, you believe the Republican. Not everybody, but at a 7-to-1 ratio. That's massive. That is an incredible swing on what is true, what is false, based purely upon the label that you have on your heart. That is a massively scary graph. Okay? And these aren't politicians. These are people. These are Americans. They polled Americans. Who do you believe? And independents who've got no, skin in the game, so to speak, split the difference. So, this is a problem. If you're a critical thinker, one of the best approaches, and we're kind of out of time, like one of the best approaches, like if you've got two groups that disagree with each other, and we show a lot of bias towards people in our group. Like even if you put people into groups and just say you're group A, you're group B, the group A people treat the group A people better than they treat the group B people. It's another cognitive distortion. But if you want to resolve that, if you want Democrats and Republicans to get along with each other, like there's been a lot of interesting studies, the Robbers Cave study, at summer camp, they put kids into different groups, got them to hate each other, and then got them to like each other again by working together for a common cause, fixing things together, resolving problems together, brought them together. What they found is that if you just talk to people in the other group and understand them, then you realize they're not your enemy, hopefully, usually, Republicans and Democrats both don't like racism. They just have different definitions of racism and what it means to be racist. If you understand that, then you realize, wow, they're not evil. They just have a different perspective than me on it. Crazy notion, I know. And also, if you just refuse to stamp your heart with something, if you just reject labels, then that helps avoid these massive swings in how you perceive evidence. And really, when it comes down to it, if there is a disagreement between two different views, you have to, like I've told you guys since week 1, you have to dig into the primary sources. And in the case here, like there were no primary sources, right? Like there's just testimony. Like there was no underlying, video evidence or anything like that you could look at, right? And so maybe we could do an exercise where we look at the primary evidence of January 6th and try and see what actually happened on January 6th. That could be interesting. It might also get me fired. So, maybe we won't do that. I don't know. But look at the actual evidence and try to figure out what's right from it. So I'll leave you guys with this. So the Ents in Lord of the Rings, as we were talking about Billy earlier, the Ents reject labels. They say, I am on nobody's side because nobody's on my side. They're rejecting teams and things like that. And as such, that frees them mentally. And that is it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed the lecture today. I enjoyed reading your conversations on chat. I like the lively conversations you guys have. So keep it up. You guys are great. All right. I'll see you guys on Friday. Peace.